All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I will begin by introducing myself. My name is Theory Usher. I'm a senior mathematical statistician at the Food and Drug Administration, and I am co-moderating this webinar today along with Michael Dumel. Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Theory. My name is Michael Dumel. I am a mathematical statistician at the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and most of my work has to do with monitoring water quality in the US.
Thank you. And so without further ado, I will have the mentors introduce themselves, and I will just name you guys one at a time, and then I'll have the mentees introduce themselves. Today, we have 4 awesome mentors and 3 awesome mentees. So Brittany, I will let you start off.
Hi, everyone. And just to be clear, do you want us to give a name and also the question you asked around general advice, or hold off on that?
You can just hold off on that. So name, pronouns, institution, and whatever area of work that you're in.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. I am Brittany Bailey. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an assistant professor of statistics at Amherst College.
All right, thank you. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Town. I'm a mathematical statistician. I'm a branch chief at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, where we collect the behavior risk factor surveillance survey, and my pronoun is she and her.
Thank you. Eric?
Hey everybody, I'm Eric J. Daza. I'm a lead biostatistician in industry at Evidation. I also run a newsletter called Stats of One. And I am the founder and chief editor of Stats of One. My pronouns are he and him.
Thank you. Jeffrey?
Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. My pronouns are he, him. I am currently the director of the Mathematical Statistics Research Center in the Office of Survey Methods Research at the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the mentees. Kendra?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kendra Plord. I am an assistant professor of biostatistics at Yale University. I'm just completed my first year as a professor not too long ago. And my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you. Megan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan McCabe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in my 4th year of the PhD program in biostatistics at University of Iowa.
Thank you. And Dorcas?
Hello, my name is Dorcas Washington. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a 4th year biostats PhD student at the University of Cincinnati. I also work full-time as research data analyst at the University of Cincinnati.
Thank you, and thank you all for the great introductions. So just a couple of ground rules. So if you have any questions for the panelists, please put them in the Q&A section and not in the chat section. So the Q&A section will be monitored for those questions that we can put forth before our panel. While everyone is thinking and brainstorming questions, we have a couple of questions that we would like our panel to address. For the sake of time, for most questions, I will probably ask just a couple of people to provide a response. But if you feel compelled to provide a response, please feel free to chime in. The first 60 minutes of this webinar will be devoted to our panel discussion, whereas the last 30 minutes will be a breakout session, and we'll give you further instructions as we get closer to that point. All right, so let's kick off with our first question. How does your communication style as a mentor or a mentee change in different environments? And by different environments, I mean in person versus virtual versus hybrid. And so I'll start off with Eric and with Megan?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. It's a good question. So, in-person versus personal versus hybrid. Oh, hold on one second. Plane flying by. Okay, so in person, I think I actually feel my mentoring style doesn't really change too much. It's built off of the same core of being just really, conversational and focusing on what my mentee wants out of the conversation. And um, actually, I don't have a big sample for in-person mentoring. For me, it's mostly been online or over Zoom or at conferences. But it's the same idea where I am just kind of generally interested in what my mentee wants to learn, wants to gain, and then giving them feedback from that while also just building camaraderie and sharing experiences.
Yeah, I think I from the mentee perspective would second everything that Eric just said. I think from a mentee side, it's really nice to be able to still have that kind of conversational aspect when you're in that remote environment. So I've been pretty fortunate, I think, with most of my mentor-mentee relationships to be able to meet all of them in person at least once to kind of establish that kind of connection first. But I think building in kind of some time to talk about like yourself and just get to know one another is probably like one of the best ways to keep it a little bit more similar to the in-person experience, I think.
So Megan, that was a great point about trying to make it similar to an in-person experience. And so and I'll actually open this question up for everyone because I think that it's pretty timely. Do you have some ways of kind of emulating in-person informal meetings when you have that remote connection? I know that's a question that has been on a lot of people's mind, particularly as we've gone more hybrid.
So I don't know if you want us to raise our hand or how you want to handle this, but I can chime in since I supervise about 9 folks, and one of the things that and I consider those sort of mentor-mentee relationships. And one thing working with the federal government is we leverage Microsoft Teams a lot, and some people have obviously have strong feelings about Microsoft Teams. But one thing that I always try to sort of convey or communicate that as long as I'm sort of green on Teams, my status is available. Anybody can sort of cold call me, reach out to me, send me a message. So just sort of like making myself as available as possible, because we don't have the luxury of sort of walking down to someone's workstation and just sort of checking in, asking how they're doing. So, as long as, I'm available on Teams, I'm on the workday, people could reach out to me whenever they want.
Yeah, I think with my mentor, we use Slack as a more informal platform. Email feels so formal sometimes. And so if I'm up late working, sometimes we'll be slacking back and forth even because we're just trying to finish this paper real quick. And it's more of like if I were to drop by his office or something, but at any time of the day, any day.
And I noticed Michelle has her hand up.
Yes, prior to COVID, I would have, for the people that I mentor for my job, I would have them stop in at lunch. And so I would set up lunchtime. And so we would kind of just discuss some things over lunch. That's when that was a little bit informal. So that's just when they wanted to just kind of just talk, and we weren't really necessarily brainstorming on anything. So what I've done is I've set up time. I set aside my lunchtime still to do that. And so some of them, they'll come, they'll set up a time at lunch, and we'll even actually eat lunch, and we'll just kind of talk about some different things that they're going through. And this is what I do with some of the people I mentor at work. But outside of work, I do most of my mentoring after 5 o'clock.
thank you all for the really great responses. It seems like everyone has thought quite a bit about how to kind of create that informal space in a hybrid setting. And so kudos to everyone. Another thing that I would like to touch upon is inclusion. How do you think about inclusion as a mentor and or as a mentee, especially in a remote or a hybrid environment? So I think I will ask Brittany and Dorcas.
Yeah. So I work at a primarily undergraduate institution. So most of my mentoring is around serving undergraduates. So when I think about inclusion, I'm thinking about like, what information do students need at different times and what information might they be missing depending on their background. So I'm first generation. I was the first in my family to go to college. I was a poor kid. I'm a Black woman, and all of these things kind of determine to some degree access to resources and knowledge. And just from my own shortcomings or things that I missed out on going through my undergraduate education, I'm particularly sensitive to students who also might just be like fumbling their way through. So when I think about inclusion, I try to be like really intentional about reaching out to the students that I know who kind of have those similar backgrounds and make sure that I'm prompting them at different times of the year to be like, hey, are you thinking about this right now? Or hey, have you started talking to somebody about this? Like, it's not necessarily that I need to have all of the information for them, but just making sure they are plugged in some way to the people who they need to be connected with to get things done. And also just recognizing too that the types of advice I might give depends, I guess, similarly on their background. So, you know, choosing a major, everybody, all the students here are constantly worried about choosing a major in their sophomore year. And that advice might change for international versus domestic students just because of things around OPT as they graduate and the implications for the job market after the fact. So I have to I had to know that at some point. So I have to look into things myself. And then I also have to be mindful of that when I'm in conversation with students.
Yeah, I want to jump in and yeah, I agree with what Brittany said. That really resonated with me too. And I love the way you articulated, Brittany. It's much better than I've done. I'm fairly early on in my own mentorship process. I've done it for a few years, but more in a more self-introspective way. I'm still fairly new to it. So as a sort of earlier mentor, I find it helpful to and to be okay with what are the places where I feel like I'm being excluded or I'm in a disenfranchised group, and then focus on finding the same types of people in that group who share my experiences and use that as a base of experience to build your mentorship relationships and mentorship style. But then what I do to then expand that is, for example, I work with JEDI at the ASA, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Outreach Group. And so that helps me map my own experiences to those of others to understand where I'm privileged and how that feels to folks on that axis. So there's that aspect of it too. It's okay if you're just starting to go with what you know, but also keep a mind and an eye to how does this expand out to other groups? And where am I on the privileged side of the axis?
Thank you both for those insights. Dorcas, I want to give you an opportunity to respond as well.
Okay, so in regard to inclusion, I think about it more from the mentee side of what am I missing? What am I missing out on in terms of connections I don't have, knowledge I don't have, things that I feel like I'm missing something in this journey, this learning process. And some of the things that I noticed that I struggle with are soft skills, right? Soft skills. And I think that helps with inclusion, right? Because it allows you to communicate more effectively. So when I'm thinking about it remotely or via hybrid, I often think about just always introducing myself. I'm active on Twitter. I like to follow anybody and everybody who does anything data. and I just introduce myself, or I will retweet someone and that gets me like talking to them and someone else. So yeah.
Thank you for your insights. I think that's particularly timely, what you said about utilizing social media and LinkedIn, particularly being in this hybrid environment. I think those are very strong tools that we have at our disposal. I want to give everyone an opportunity, as others are thinking about questions and answers, or questions to pose to the panel. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to respond to that question about inclusion. Please feel free to just come off of mute if you have additional comments you would like to provide. So I'll give you guys this opportunity now. If not, I would like to revisit a question that was asked by an attendee. I just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to address this question. It's a really good one. For the mentors, how have you found mentorship as you've moved further into your career, especially in a virtual first environment? How have you found your advocates? And I'm inviting all 4 mentors to provide an additional response if you have any.
Maybe I'll chime in first. So I mean, my sort of experience has almost exclusively been in the federal government. So I hit 17 years in January working with the federal government. And when I started my my first job at BLS, I was afforded I was allowed to finish my PhD while working at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And, my supervisor at the time was on my dissertation committee. So he naturally became sort of a mentor in that capacity. He's since moved on. He now works at the Census Bureau. And I've had different supervisors come and go throughout that time. And the role that I currently occupy, my previous supervisor held, and now she's at the Census Bureau. So, I've maintained connections with all my previous supervisors, mostly as a way, I could reach out to Wendy, talk to Wendy about, some of the nuances of working with the group of people that I currently work with, because she has that familiarity and background. And so just, maintaining the connections that you've initiated over your career, I think is very valuable.
Thanks, Jeff. That was a very interesting point about how your supervisors and those in a leadership position have served as mentors for you. And I think that's a great segue into the next question that I have for the mentors on this panel. Often mentees have less power than mentors within an organization. How do you recognize that, and how do you navigate power dynamics as a mentor?
You want me to go? I can go first. What I normally do is I talk about it from the standpoint of people I've worked with on the job and not necessarily outside of the job. What I normally do is I try to make sure I build trust. And a lot of times they come to me. I don't necessarily, seek mentees out, that they normally come to me. So what I do is I make sure that I have an open door policy that anytime that they really want to talk, that they can talk about freely about anything. So basically I just, just like I said, I build trust with them. And when, if we come to some type of consensus when we're talking about goal setting, I make sure that whatever I've determined that I'm going to do and what they're going to do, I just make sure that I continue to build that trust. And, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And just, and when they want to come talk about, let's say if they're going to talk about their manager or something that they're going through on the job, I make sure that I let them know that whatever they communicate with me is going to stay with me. And I make sure that it never gets out, that they always feel like they're free to talk about anything. Because as everyone know, once you're coming up the ladder, everyone goes through different things. So you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to be able to voice some of the concerns that they're going through. So just making sure I have an open door policy and always just making sure that they trust me.
I can speak from the mentee side. I think having multiple mentors helps, because if you feel uncomfortable with something that a mentor says, you can talk to another mentor about it. You don't have to name names, but you could just say, this came up in one of my meetings. I was told this, like, what are your thoughts on that? And I think in general, having multiple mentors is good. I mean, even for different aspects, like, maybe there's one mentor for more of, I want to mimic your career, but you're not in my research area. So there's your mentor for, how did you do that? Can you help me do that similar thing, but within my specialty, things like that.
And Eric has his hand up.
Yeah, jumping off of that too, I think a great way to build trust is to position yourself as like a servant, or providing, like helping provide a service and helping to be a coach. That's the way I like to position myself, thinking about when I was in your position, what is the type of help that I wanted or I would have needed. And to position myself to say, I can try to help you accomplish those things. And those things involve coaching you on how to build a structure for your timeline, coaching you on setting goals. And you can see that I'm also struggling with some of those things. So hopefully building a sense of empathy there as well.
I also think about this along the lines of when a mentee comes to you with a problem, how do we go about resolving that if they want it resolved? And so again, working with undergraduate students, there may be times where they have tried to reach out to somebody, like administrative at Amherst College or something, and their email might get ignored, but mine might not. So there's a conversation that's had around, like, what does the mentee want to handle on their own, or what attempts have they made, versus when is it okay or appropriate for me to step in and try to, like, fix it for them, if you will, just because I know that I will be listened to, so I can use my power to make sure something gets addressed for the student. And just to add, like, with their consent, because you don't want to be like taking care of things when they don't want you taking care of it for them.
Those are all really great insights. Thank you for sharing that point. I love the point about building trust, about advocacy, about utilizing our power. Really excellent points. Now I want to ask a question that is targeted to the mentees. I apologize. I think I was looking at the wrong question. This once again is targeted towards mentors. How do you make mentees with different backgrounds from you feel valued and respected? I think we've started discussing that in terms of building that trust and using your own power and privilege. But I will let you guys expand on some of those ideas.
So I can chime in first. So I think this has sort of been said already, but my goal as a mentor is to really try to take a deep interest in the person, learn about them, so I can be their best advocate. I can offer them support in their own development. And I think too, I'm a naturally very introspective person as well. So I try to be sort of cognizant of where I've come from, what my own sort of biases are, and just sort of reflect on those conversations that I've had with my mentees to sort of make sure that, you know, there are no missteps, or that I can recalibrate or redirect as necessary, and just, you know, try to support this notion that, you know, we both can learn from each other, and you know, just things like that.
I'll chime in. I manage a staff around 30 employees, and some of them are computer programmers, some of them are statisticians, but I also have non-technical staff members. So what I do is I give everyone a voice. And from time to time, when I do my technical meetings, even someone that's not on the technical field, I give them, I'll tell them I want them to report on certain things. So it kind of let them feel like they're important, and kind of show that everyone is equal, and that just because someone may not have a technical background, or they may not even have a degree, I still try to make people feel that everyone is equal. So that's not necessarily my mentoring side, because I just, even with mentoring, I just treat all my mentees the same. But when you think about technical versus non-technical, I just try to make people feel that they have a voice, and that whatever they have to say, you know, it's important.
I start by just trying to get to know them and sort of establishing some sort of foundation for our relationship. So if we are having this conversation because we are entering into some mentor-mentee relationship, like for me, it's automatically advisees to some degree that might get assigned to me. But it's about learning about them. What do they want from this relationship? Trying to give them some guidance on like what it is that I think I can provide for them in case they're not sure what they want, but always just maintaining that communication about what is it that you need? What are your goals? How can we make sure that this relationship is serving their goals as well? So listening and teasing apart what it is that the mentee wants or needs.
Thank you for the great responses. And I recognize I asked this question to the mentors, but I think as mentors, we learn best from our mentees in terms of what they need. So I'm going to flip this question to the mentees. And this is a very candid question, and please feel free to not respond if you don't feel comfortable doing so. But one, do you feel any trepidation in terms of approaching a potential mentor that has a different background from you? And then two, what are some things that would make you feel valued and respected in that relationship?
I can go first.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Dorcas.
All right. So, a lot of my mentors have the same background as me, somewhat statistics or biostatistics. It's typically one or the other. But actually, I have one person who's on my dissertation committee. She has a PhD in math, so, you know, not stats. But she spent a lot of time learning biostats to become really good at what she does, which is longitudinal studies and stuff like that. And so that's actually really, really useful because she's coming at it from a different perspective, like when she's teaching it, and it's very helpful. But when I came to approach her, I did not know she had that background in mathematics, actually. I thought it was something else, but I did not let that stop me, even though she told me like, oh, it's not the same as yours. And then the second part was, what are some things that make me feel valued and respected? Just the open door policy is really, really nice to have, or like open Slack, chat, whatever is really, really useful. And also knowing that there's no question too big or too small. Like some things that may seem really nuanced and detailed are also really important.
Yeah, I really like that point about the open Slack, open door kind of in the virtual setting especially. It's really nice to have a means of reaching out to someone where you don't feel like you're just adding to their inbox that's unmanageable already. And another thing that Brittany said earlier that I think is really helpful from a mentee perspective is just having kind of that intro session where you kind of like just spend time getting to know one another. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, these are my, career goals or something, but like kind of having that just person to person trying to figure out like what would be the best goals for this kind of relationship. So
Yeah, I'm going to take a stab at the question too. So as a mentee, I used to feel more trepidation approaching mentors, but now that I did a postdoc and now being an assistant professor, I've kind of learned that there really shouldn't be any trepidation. I mean, if you go up to someone and you say, wow, I really admire your career trajectory, or I really admire all the work you've done. I mean, no one's going to hate hearing that from someone. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's like not an honor. It feels good to hear that there's someone who wants to mirror kind of your trajectory, and people want to help people, at least in my experience. So, I mean, you don't want to ask too much, but saying like, could I just set up a meeting with you once, like 4 times a year, maybe not even that, twice a year, or even once a year, just to chat and talk about, how you decided to make some big career decisions or something, just to kind of get your feedback. Or can I email you occasionally? Like, you don't want to overburden, but I think anyone in our field would be happy to do that. So I want to encourage mentees out there not to feel any trepidation. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is they can say, no, I'm overburdened enough, I can't help. And that's fine. You shouldn't take that personally. And then the second part of the question, it moved. So now I
Feeling
forget.
valued and respected.
Oh, valued and respected. Yes. So in the virtual environment, I feel like we have screens in front of us all the time. And if I'm meeting with someone and they're like this, reading emails, that doesn't feel very valued or respected. As a mentee and with a mentor, if I have a mentor it's one thing if just their camera's in the other screen, but if they're actively listening, despite all the constant distractions we have around our screens, that really makes me feel valued and respected, the active listening. And also just as simple as, how are you? Not so much of the work. I have mentors where it's like, it's work and it's always work, and that's okay. But having those mentors that really care about you and how you're doing, especially in this virtual environment that can feel very isolating, I feel like that really makes me feel more valued and respected on a deeper level than with the mentors who are all work focused.
Hey, Eric, I was hoping you could expand a little bit on what you put in the chat about giving and receiving constructive feedback.
Sure. Let's see. Oh gosh, as you can tell, I'm very active in chat sections of these virtual sessions. Where I'm doing well. Oh yeah. So for example, I recently had a performance review at work, and one of the areas where I constantly need to improve is something out of my area, which is more of the engineering tasks. So I work in a data science role, and I really like getting feedback on places where I do need to improve, and also places where I do well. So building off an earlier point about giving positive feedback, that really helps me feel welcome and feel like my work is valued, even in areas that I'm not that familiar with. And because of that, or not because of that, but in tandem with that, I try to do the same things with my mentees or coworkers I supervise. So another coworker who is much more expert in analytics engineering processes, I see those processes working for them, and I try to encourage them in the same way. But they also want to learn statistics skills. So I encourage them and give them the same kind of feedback when we go through exercises they've done or things at work they've done that are specifically analysis focused. So that's what I meant.
So I would actually like to take a second to chime in as a mentee. So as the mentors can tell you, we are also mentees, and even some mentees are mentors. But I specifically have a mentor who is not a statistician or a statistics adjacent. She is an MD. That relationship is kind of built around a point that Kendra made, kind of watching her career trajectory and, noticing that she has this, great aptitude for navigating the culture of our institution. And one thing that I've found very helpful in terms of feeling valued and respected is seeing that she's taken time to educate herself on, how statisticians navigate through our institution. And we've had discussions about my career trajectory. And one of the first questions she asked was, "Are you involved in ASA?" And I didn't even realize she knew what ASA was, but that was like one of her first questions. And so that shows that she's taken the time to kind of educate herself. And, time is a very valuable commodity. So that really made me feel like, oh, well, she must think I at least have some sort of potential if she's taking the time to educate herself about, the career position that I'm in. So I just wanted to add that in. So I want to provide a verbal reminder to the attendees. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will put those forth to the panel. In the meantime, I will continue to ask a few more questions. And so this question I want to open up to everyone because it's a very sensitive question that I have seen, that I've actually had people ask me and others. How do you approach difficult conversations with a mentor or a mentee?
Well, I guess I'll jump in real quick. In person, I feel like email can get tricky. I mean, because they can't hear, how you are asking that question. If it's a difficult question, those are probably best for just setting up a meeting and chatting about it. I don't know if anyone else has any other things about difficult questions.
I mean, I want to echo, I guess, one of the things I think Michelle initially brought up earlier. It makes it a little less difficult if you have trust first. And then also being in person, so you can you can really get all the cues in that conversation. But yeah, I personally tend to be pretty straightforward about things, but my mentees, I think, know that about me, so it makes it easier. If, for example, I need to like set them straight about something, so like students, like, oh, are you really studying? Like, have you really been doing what you need to be doing? And there's always like a touch of humor involved that makes things a little bit lighter than maybe they would be otherwise. I don't know, I might have more to contribute later, but I'll let other people jump in.
Yeah, in my area, I've had to, as I mentioned, I operate almost exclusively virtually or online. And so if I'm not having that personal face-to-face, that is the best that really helps. Then over email or Slack, what I've learned helps is, this is more of a personal style, but I like using emojis a lot, and emojis are sort of a proxy for behavioral indicators over Slack and over email. It's also, it also depends on certain groups, generations, age cohorts, perhaps. So you need to, attend to your mentee's style. Remember, your mentors and mentees can go either way as far as like age cohort for you. So that's one thing to be aware of. So emojis can help. And the other thing is like to learn with your mentor or your mentee if they are in some way like neurodivergent, where they can take certain types of feedback different ways. So, and that's really just a more general highlight of like, what is your feedback style? So, try to establish early on, like, what kinds of feedback do you like to receive? How do you like to receive input? If they like receiving input more personally, then you might want to have your sessions be more in person versus over email or Slack. So things like that to consider.
I guess since the pandemic, I would say previously I would just have in-person meetings and just kind of talk to them, about how I thought that certain things were not, that they were not actually meeting their goals, or they're not actually, that the relationship is not necessarily going the way I thought it was going to be going. But now what I do is I pick up the phone. Sometimes I think the phone could be better, because if you're on, sometimes I think sometimes the virtual environment is a little bit impersonal too. So I'll just pick up the phone and talk to them and get their side of the story, and I'll get my, give my input. But I think basically just picking up the phone.
I really like what Eric said about sort of learning about how they like to receive feedback and constructive input. And one thing that I always have to remind myself is the way someone likes to receive feedback may not be necessarily the best way that I like to receive feedback. So, I think it goes to building trust, learning about the person, developing that relationship, and just being present and prepared. I think you create an environment that is naturally safe, so you have that understanding that you can't, a mentor-mentee relationship, there are going to be difficult moments, and you have that understanding that you can have those difficult conversations because you've built that trust and you've done a lot to cultivate that relationship and have that safe environment.
Thank you. I'm going to invite the mentees to provide a little bit more perspective on this question of difficult conversations. I know previously we had talked about navigating power dynamics in a relationship. And so some mentees may struggle with initiating a difficult conversation. So can you provide some perspective as to how you would go about that?
So I think what Michelle said about over the phone being better, but also like I kind of will plan out what I want to say, or at least points that I want to make, like maybe in the email or like something like that. And I don't send the email to the person, my mentor. I send it to like a friend, so it makes sense, right? And that like there's like a logical flow, and that there's not any really gaps that can be there, or that I can fill in those gaps if there are questions. And I think the hardest part though is just being brave and like having to speak your truth and like state what's happening. But I think the way I get over that is by realizing like the other alternative is just like suffering in silence, or whatever consequence of not speaking up there is, because there's always a consequence, right? So
I would echo that. I think I really think, kind of to an earlier point, it would depend for me like who the mentor is. If it's someone I feel like we really have built that trust and like have established a pretty strong relationship, I think then like kind of just asking for a few minutes to talk about like, be realistic about how much time you need to discuss it, and kind of setting up like 30 minutes if it's going to be a 30-minute thing, or like kind of just trying to practically think through those details. And I really like the point too about like kind of writing down the things that you need to touch on, and that would make me feel a little bit better about going into a conversation like that.
Thank you for, I'm sorry, Kendra.
Oh,
Go
just one
ahead.
other thing. It just goes back to what I said before. Having multiple mentors is really helpful because I've gone to other mentors to get feedback on how to approach an issue with another mentor before. And that's very helpful because I've had mentors who give me a good way of framing it from like, I don't want to work with you, to, oh, actually, you know, I want some other opportunities or other experiences. I want to broaden. And it's like, oh, that is a much better way to say no, without saying, I don't want to work with you or something. So again, multiple mentors, very helpful.
No, thank you for those perspectives. I really like that, the idea of planning ahead and being sure about exactly what you want to say, and getting that advice from other people can be helpful as well. So I think when people think about mentoring or mentorship, they always envision this long-term mentoring relationship that just kind of, goes on, and, it helps you throughout your career. But sometimes mentoring relationships don't quite look like that. They can really be goal specific. And so I want to put forth this question to everyone. What are some goals that you had as a mentee or a mentor, and how did having a mentor help you achieve those goals?
I can chime in on that one. So it's kind of a crazy story how I got my first mentor. I was in Kentucky and my parents were visiting, and we went to like this museum, and I was talking to someone about like what I wanted to do with my BA in math. I was like, yeah, I think I want to do biostats. And this woman was walking by, and she was a biostatistician for Eli Lilly. And I was like, okay. And so we connected on LinkedIn and traded numbers. And so I talk to her sometimes like once every other year, right? But like she's kind of seen me since the last like 8 years, right? Like seen my growth and my trajectory. And I kind of just come back to her with like, hey, this is what I think I want to do now. What do you think about this? Or she'll send me like a job, like, hey, what do you think about these qualities in this job? Like, what do you like about them? What do you not like about them? So we kind of go back and forth collaborating on like figuring out what I like, what I'm good at, what I need to do like day to day to get there, or even like month to month. So yeah, we have like a game plan, and in that is finding other mentors, right, that can help me achieve maybe steps 2 through 4, or to help me with this one stage of like dissertation. Like, so yeah, all that is based off of like my one interaction with a mentor in Kentucky. So I think yeah, just putting yourself out there somehow, even if it's not the most obvious way.
Thank you. That is such an interesting story. I like Eric's comment. Yay for statistically significant meetings. Wow. Anyone else want to chime in?
I guess I can talk to like maybe a couple different types of mentors I've pursued. I think that like nowadays, like a lot of the conferences, you can sign up for mentoring programs. So I was going to CSP for the first time last year, and just signed up for it as a way to like meet someone and have someone I knew at the meeting and kind of make a connection that way. And it ended up being really fruitful, but I didn't really have like high expectations for it. It just was kind of like, just want to meet someone who's been at this conference before and kind of knows how to navigate it. So I think like something small like that could be your goal, but I've also had mentors where we have like very specific tasks, like looking at a CV or doing mock interviews. So just kind of like being open-minded that your goals would be different depending on who that mentor might be.
Thank you, Megan, for your feedback. I like that idea of having different goals for different mentors. Any other responses from the panel?
Yeah, I can add something short. Hopefully, that's always famous last words for me. But my manager at work, my last manager at work was amazing. He was not just my manager, but also a mentor, and that's something else that is good to know. Mentors can be very ephemeral. They'll pop up, or you'll realize, like I have, like, oh my gosh, I guess I was sort of mentoring this person. Didn't realize that was what that was. But anyways, so my manager at work has actually helped me create some goals that I didn't know I needed to grow professionally. So that's a sign of a really good mentor in my book. They'll help you identify where you can improve to be more productive, or to not necessarily be more productive, but in your life, if you want to accomplish something that you don't realize you want to accomplish. A good mentor can help you see that.
Thank you, Eric. So we are at 4 minutes to the hour, and I want to leave enough time for our breakout rooms. And so I'm going to ask one final question to the panel. If you could keep your responses relatively short, so I'll give everyone about 30 seconds or less. What would be your one piece of general advice regarding mentorship?
I can go. Setting expectations early on. Just first meetings should just be, what are your expectations of them? What are their expectations of you? So that you're starting off on the same page.
Being committed, following through on what you say you're going to do, and following up.
I'm going to steal what Kendra and multiple other people have said earlier, which is, mentoring is not just one person. And actually, I'll drop in the chat one of my favorite things. It's technically a mentoring map for academics, but I think it is broadly applicable. So it identifies a lot of different areas where you might need or want mentorship in your life, and gives you spaces to sort of fill out who those people might be to fill those roles. So just keeping in mind that, like, you want a broad set of mentors, and seek them out. If you fill out this map and you realize you have a gap somewhere, try to think through who is it that can fill that gap.
Yeah, I'm actually taking that piece of advice as my learning as a mentee, because that's one of the places I need to improve. But I'll echo what other folks have said and what I said earlier. For me, the advice would be, it really helps to learn to, and it's okay, you're not going to be, you have to practice. You won't start off really good at this necessarily, but be specific in the questions you have for your mentors, and also timely. So if there's a way you can say, like, could we, come back to this next month, specific and timely, that really helps me as a mentor be able to schedule so I can help you the best.
My advice would be, kind of jumping off that one, would be do your homework, right? Like when you have a question, but also there's no question too small. Like if you're doing your research and getting your background, and you still don't understand something, or something's still unclear, go ahead and ask.
I think something that's really helpful is when you're starting the relationship, then I think you need to set some goals. So it's, it's basically what everyone is saying, but just know what your end goal is going to be.
Yeah, and I think my piece of advice would be to be open-minded, because like Eric mentioned before, like your mentor might suggest something that you never really anticipated pursuing, but being open-minded is helpful, I think, as a mentee.
All right, those are some great nuggets to wrap up this portion of the webinar with. So before we go into breakout sessions, I just want to say thank you to our amazing panel of mentees and mentors for sharing their perspectives and the knowledge that they've gained. And so now we're going to go into the breakout sessions. I believe, Donna, you're going to be putting people in the breakout rooms.
Actually, Theory, we're going to end the webinar, and I've shared the link for the
Yes.
meeting a couple of times in the chat. I also sent everyone an email, and we'll just join really quickly the Zoom meeting so that everyone has audio and video.
All right, wonderful. So the link is in the chat. Please navigate to the other Zoom link and we will begin the breakout sessions.